afternoon after lunch. Hopefully that woke you up. How are you all feeling? A bit more energy, guys. How are you all feeling? So you're going to need that because I'm going to bend your ear about IT policy, right? So today I'm going to tell you a bit about DevSecOps. And so at RMB, we've got a very strong culture of experimentation. You would have seen that theme come through at a lot of the talks that I've done in the past about some of the experiments that we do and how that allows us to set our direction. So DevSecOps for us was kind of an experiment that happened a little bit on purpose and a little bit by mistake as well. And so, it really it talks about how you can bring DevOps and security together. But I'll get into that a bit more in detail just now. Let me tell you a bit about the problem. So who of you has written an IT policy in your career? Okay, a couple. What did you do with that? Okay. Could you find it afterwards? Okay. And then after that, so another question is, so that IT policy you wrote, do you think that your organization, is compliant against that? Show of hands. What I thought. So, you guys probably have a similar problem, but I'll tell you about a problem that we have and one of the things that came to bear. So, IT policies. We write policies about a number of things. Security is one of those, and I'm going to focus quite a lot on that today. So we write these things, we put them somewhere cryptic, we store them where people can find them maybe. And then what happens is we say, well, cool, we've got a policy. What we should do is we should measure ourselves against that. Like, are we compliant? And at the same time, what we typically do is we get some people to come and do vulnerability testing. Just throw that in as well. Just show us if we're compliant, if we've got vulnerability issues. And so the policy is a manual process. Human beings do that. The kind of measurement against that and the vulnerability checks, humans do that too. That's pretty manual. And then what happens, we get these kind of manual reports telling us how good or bad our world looks. And they're pretty thick usually, with a lot of red in them. And then we say, okay, dev teams, ops teams, everybody, we've got some stuff to do. Can you please manually remediate these things? And so this is typically a cycle that goes on. And while this is all happening, what happens is the world changes. We've got new vulnerabilities. We've got new policies. We've got new software in our environment. And so things are changing, and we're moving kind of at a snail's pace. So what today is about this experiment that I'm going to tell you about at RMB, where we did some DevSecOps. And it talks about how you can move your security velocity from months to days to even hours. Cool, so let's talk a bit about DevSecOps, a bit more about what it is. So as you would gather with the name, it's dev, development team, ops, operation team, sec, security team, right? And if you go and do the kind of literature research, you'll know that to do DevSecOps, what you've got to do is you've got to make changes to your engineering pipeline. You've got to make changes to your security operations. You've got to think about collection of data, because data science and what you do with the data is incredibly powerful. And of course, you've got to see how you're doing compliance-wise. So let's talk a little bit about what I call the engineering pipeline. People don't like that. It's okay. We can call it the DevOps pipeline. It's fine. So you guys would have seen this. We talked a bit about this during the course of today, and we talked about some of the things that you do. So typically what happens in the world? Well, we've got something happens in production, there's an issue. We need to build a new feature. We need to build a new platform or solution. We typically log it somewhere. We plan it. We allocate it. We do the work. We version control it. And then we start getting into our kind of the rest of the pipeline, the automated builds, the static code analysis, unit testing, integration testing, automated deployment, and of course, configuration management. We do the two kind of hand in hand. We use Puppet in RMB. And so the fascinating thing is, it's probably overused and overloaded. People talk about code eating the world. It's pretty corny, but it's pretty true, right? And I'll tell you why. Because in this new world, there's pretty much nobody who isn't coding something. So what happens is our developers code as usual, but our operations team, they're in the configuration management place, and they're essentially coding Puppet code, right, to make sure that our infrastructure is at the state it needs to be, that our apps are deployed as they need to be. But what gets really interesting is we came across this thing called OpenSCAP. Now, OpenSCAP is like a way to define your IT policy in code. Now, that's pretty interesting. So no more documents. Maybe you just code that. And maybe your security team codes that, works with the operations team, who say, cool, that's the policy. How do we actually make it so using our Puppet code? And of course, the devs help through this process. So it's a pretty interesting and different world. And what happens is the only manual parts in this process is actually the coding itself. So, in the operations space, we've got Puppet lint, static code analysis. In terms of picking up security stuff, we use a thing called SonarQube in the dev pipeline. And it's actually very hard to discern the pipelines because they're actually very similar. It's dev, it's ops, and it will be security. So this is all interesting, but what does it really mean? So if you play it forward and we did an experiment, what you get from this is a very powerful tripwire as well. So not only is it kind of compliance, it also tells you when people are messing with your stuff. When people are changing stuff that they shouldn't be, if you're watching that, if you're actually looking at what Puppet is telling you, that's a pretty powerful thing. And if you match that with the information you already have in your security landscape about what people are up to, that's a pretty powerful thing, in totality. So what does the end state look like? So the end state is really just about coding, right? We'll code those policies. Dev and Sec and Ops, you guys get together in a room, code the policies. We'll run the OpenSCAP, and we'll get feedback around compliance as frequently as we like. And we'll remediate as frequently as we like. And the world can change around us, as it always does, but it means our velocity can move from months to hours to minutes. And that's a pretty powerful thing. So really, I think the heart of it really comes down to, if you think about security, it's really a culture in an organization. It's all about how you think and how you design. But the key takeout here is we need more coders. But we don't need coders in dev. We need coders in ops and sec and so many other places. And these are the skills that we have to build. Because if you think, and you go into the marketplace right now and you go and try and find these skills, you're going to be looking pretty hard because there aren't lots. And so at RMB and F&B, we've been working with an institution called We Think Code. Where are the We Think Code guys? Can you put up your hands? Having lunch. Yeah. And so what we're doing with We Think Code is we're partnering and we're kind of funding essentially a 2-year curriculum borrowed from 42 in France, where we take smart kids. I call them kids, but there's some people kind of my age. And they go through this curriculum, and at the end, we have people who can code. Now, the thing that's really profound about this is that when we get this right, and we will get this right, we're going to probably double the output of all the universities combined in terms of technical people, in terms of coders. So if you think about South Africa and growing skills, that's pretty profound.